Panthers offseason in 60 seconds. Extended J.C. Horn, 4 years, $100 million, $72 million guaranteed. Good for you. Extended Tommy Tremble, Andy Dalton, Austin Corbett. Brought in Trevon Merrick in free agency, 3 years, $51 million, $34.5 guaranteed at safety. Signed Tershawn Wharton, Bobby Brown, and Patrick Jones up front, all two pretty decent, like mid-tier free agent deals. Also retained Michael Jackson at corner and brought in Rico Dowdle as their number 2 running back after Jonathan Brooks had that horrendous injury last year, which I'm still bummed about. Lost Xavier Woods and Ian Thomas in free agency. In the draft, Tedero McMillan, 8th overall receiver. Edge Nick Scorton in the 2nd round, 51st overall. Edge Princely Umanmielen in the 3rd round, 77th overall. Brought in Trevor Etienne in the 4th round at running back, and then Lathan Ransom, the safety, in the 4th round. Dave, what are you excited about with the 2025 Carolina Panthers?
I'm going to lay my cards on the table here and just say that I feel like I have things at stake with the Carolina Panthers because
that's a bad place to be.
I agree. I agree, especially after the ride we've been on since 2023. But I believed wholeheartedly in Bryce Young. I really did. I had no problem with him being the number 1 overall pick. I understood the size concerns, but he was just a magical player to watch in college, man. Like his understanding of spacing and his vision, and it was almost like watching Chris Paul, the way that he just like it's like he saw an extra dimension. And
I like that comparison. I really like that comparison, actually.
He was doing where you're just like, how did he even see that? And how does it seem like he saw it 2 seconds before anybody else did? And I knew, and he did it at Alabama, which carries weight for me when you're doing it in games where there's tons of NFL players on the field. And so even knowing that he was a small guy, I just believed. I knew he was going to be the man, and it shook my faith in who I am as a football fan when we watched the first year and the first few games of last year. I was like, holy shit, do I know anything about this sport? And so it was very exciting for me to see him resuscitate and to see him play with confidence and be able to point at the highlights and be like, look, that's what I loved. That's what I liked about Bryce Young. And I'm so excited to see if he can keep doing it. I feel a little bit vindicated just from last year, but I need it for a whole year. Like, I mean, I hope the guy can prove that he's a franchise quarterback. He doesn't need to be top 5 or top 10 or any of that crazy shit. I just need him to be somebody worth building a team around. I'm excited to see if he can do it. And my self-esteem is tied to it a little bit, I think.
I don't have that much at stake, but I'm also very excited about watching Bryce Young. I said year 2 Bryce Young. I'm saying this is year
1
2
was not
Bryce
real.
Young.
Yeah.
Year 1 was not real. This is year 2 Bryce Young.
I basically did this with Trevor Lawrence, so you can have this with Bryce Young, where I was like, the first year, the Urban Meyer, we're not doing that.
There are undeniable limitations to what Bryce Young is eventually going to be able to become as an NFL quarterback. Like, there are areas of the field he's just not going to be able to access because he has a limited arm compared to some of these other guys. And it's kind of funny, the comparison I'm about to make, but there is a comparison here. And it's why I guess have faith in both of these guys, but also I'm just kind of rooting for them. And it's Michael Penix and Bryce Young. And it's because the two things I love most about quarterback play are, do you play, and I've said this before about Bryce Young when we were talking about the top 10 offenses show, Derrik, do you play with anticipation and aggressiveness? If you play with those two things, I'm in. I want to watch that. That is stylistically what I want in a quarterback. And even if Michael Penix has 4 times the arm that Bryce Young does, both of those guys play with anticipation and aggressiveness. And that was my favorite part about watching Bryce Young last year. And you combine that with some of the off-schedule stuff outside of the pocket. We saw it in the preseason game. Like, I'm just intrigued by this. I don't know what the ceiling of it is, but I know after the back half of last season, I want more of it, because it wasn't just to me like some feel-good story. It was football I liked watching. And that's why I'm excited to tune into this again.
I really don't want to be the Grinch here. Like, I'm really struggling not to be, but he just...
So don't do it. Don't do it, Derrik.
I'm gonna do it a little bit. Like, I also generally love, and Robert, we've talked about this a little bit, quarterbacks who can anticipate and can be really aggressive. And I think with Michael Penix specifically, I'm a little bit more open to what the ceiling might look like, because, yeah, he can throw the ball through a brick wall. Like, that it accesses some stuff for that play style that I struggle a little bit to see with Bryce Young. And I think, again, we've talked about this before, there were certain points of last year where I just felt like some of the tight window stuff he was getting away with in a way that I don't know if he will last year. And it's like, I actually looked this up. He, in terms of tight window throws, had 7 drops from his receivers. Obviously, we all remember the Xavier Legette one, and that was the most in the league. I think the next closest quarterback was like 4, and it was like Josh Allen. So he did struggle with that. If you anecdotally watch him, though, like defenders also dropped a number of interceptions. There were a handful in the Falcons game, in the Saints games. Like, he just continually put the ball in harm's way. And I think when you don't have a great arm, you're probably always going to be living in that world. And sometimes you can get away with it. Like, we've talked about this a little bit before, too. Like, Brock Purdy kind of gets away with that a little bit. To me, the difference is I think Brock Purdy does a better job of getting a little bit more up and down on the ball than I think Bryce Young does at times. And so that's part of it for me. Brock Purdy is also just bigger and a better athlete. And so I think I'm completely open to the world where Bryce Young is like quarterback 18 in the way that like Baker Mayfield can be and then can be elevated by other players. I just, there's never been a top 12 quarterback that looks like this. And that's where I struggle with, I think.
I just don't think he's that far away from what Brock Purdy is. Like, stylistically, in terms of the skill set he's bringing to the position, Brock Purdy is definitively better than the 18th best quarterback.
I think Purdy is clearly objectively a bigger player. I think he's a better and smoother athlete than Bryce Young is. I think, again, his arm talent and control, I think, is a little bit better than Bryce Young's is, especially to me throwing outside of the numbers. Those are some of Purdy's best throws, whereas I think Young can kind of struggle getting the touch on those that he wants. I don't know.
I could not disagree with this more.
Can we acknowledge the irony for these specific 2 quarterbacks of saying Mr. Irrelevant?
The first and last picks in the draft.
Mr. Irrelevant is a better athlete than the number 1 overall pick.
He is, though.
Here's the last thing I'll say about this, just in terms of like the getting away with it stuff. Bryce Young was 30th among 44 quarterbacks in turnover-worthy play rate last year. Like, I think if you're comparing what he didn't get away with because his receivers were letting him down to what he did get away with in some of the throws that he was trying to force, one of those things far outweighs the other.
That's what I was going to say, too.
How often does a quarterback with this arm get away with being that aggressive that consistently? Year over year. How often does that happen?
If you know where the windows are and you play with the right amount of anticipation, I do think that you can consistently get away with it.
So he's got to be Drew Brees? I'm good on that, man. I don't know.
Derrik,
I cannot
how much
get there.
of Brock Purdy's success is just having freaking aliens that snatch the ball? Like, I mean, that's
definitely
a huge part of it.
Well, yeah, that's why Brock Purdy can produce
Bryce Young,
like the 4th
0
best quarterback.
aliens last year.
0
well, he's
aliens.
got 1 now, thankfully.
Yeah.
But like, but again, yeah, Brock Purdy is a guy who gets to produce above what his level is. But I think even individually, Brock Purdy is like a tier above at least what Bryce Young is to me.
I think that is some revisionist history based on what Brock Purdy has looked like over the course of his career. I do not think
I just think he's better now. I would not have said that in 2023, but I think he's a better player now.
And why can't Bryce Young become a better player?
He might be, but I was very resistant to Brock Purdy being that guy. And so maybe I'll be wrong again, but this is the type of player that I'm fine with holding the line and being wrong on.
I don't want to diminish what Brock Purdy has accomplished, but like, I can't get there with the idea of like Bryce Young just can't be a Brock Purdy-esque quarterback. You know, like, of course, Bryce Young can't be Lamar Jackson. He can't be Josh Allen. We know these things to be true, but I think the skill set is similar enough, even if Brock probably does have a better arm, but even still,
and he's bigger and a better athlete.
Yeah, well, give me
matters.
the damn 2023 49ers and let's find out just how Bryce Young looks. Like, I think it would be pretty good.
Let's talk about the one alien that Bryce Young does now have, Derrik. You wanted to talk about Tetairoa McMillan when it comes to what you're excited to watch with the Panthers this year.
Yeah, this is how I get back in the good graces of Panthers fans for everything I just said over the last 8 minutes.
Expelled forever.
I probably am, but I'm going to try. I opened the Falcons segment basically saying everything I love about Drake London, and Tetairoa McMillan is an extremely similar player to me. He's a 6'4", basketball-moving slasher type of player who is incredibly good at getting the ball in the air. I think Drake London has a little bit more violence and like real strength to his game in a way that Tetairoa McMillan I think is more just graceful and just finds the ball incredibly well in the air. Yeah, just smooth. Like he's not AJ Green, but in the way that he goes up and finds the ball and moves, there's like a little bit of AJ Green to him, which actually like I do think in the best case scenario, what you get out of this marriage is like a light version of Andy Dalton to AJ Green. And I think that like Tetairoa McMillan can be that kind of player. I liked him a lot in college, and I know it's just preseason, but like he's looked again, there are like a dozen or so rookies who very obviously look like they belong in the preseason. Teterow and McMillan to me is one of those guys.
It was fun talking about him with the coaches there. And early in camp, he's playing against JC Horn all the time. And one of the issues with McMillan's game coming out of college is, and I've said this, he plays like a volleyball player in ways both good and bad, right? You see the range, you see the body control, but he's just not an overly physical player, even for a bigger receiver. And so JC Horn is just in his pocket for like the first week of training camp. And it was one of the best things for him because he was looking for flags and no one was bailing him out. And I think that really did help him acclimate to the physicality of the NFL pretty quickly because of what was on the other side. And the smoothness to me, one coach, the word that they use in talking about him, which I think is really well said, and I think really does get to the heart of it, he plays very grounded for a tall receiver. And that leads to some of the smoothness. And there was a play in the preseason and it's funny because I brought up an out and up from college when we were having this discussion. He ran one against Arizona State where because he's so grounded, you see the smoothness on that route. And then the out and up he ran in the preseason, like that's where he is best. Even if he is a tall kind of jump ball receiver, when you look at the profile, his movement on those routes, and even with the ball in his hands, he is just so smooth and grounded in the way that he plays. And so I think if he can take to the physicality, he is going to really change the complexion of this offense, not only because of what he does for Bryce Young. And I think they've even had to teach Bryce Young, like some of these other guys, it needs to be a him or nobody ball. With McMillan, you don't need to do that anymore. And so I think that type of receiver and then allowing everyone else to play their more natural positions within the offense because you have a true X, he makes everything else make more sense. And he gives Bryce Young, if this works, the type of target and the type of player he just could not tap into last season, despite what Derrik says, as all of his receivers consistently let him down.
I just think he's such a beautiful stylistic fit with Bryce. Yeah, there was a long ball in the Browns game preseason week 1 where he just dropped it over his shoulder and you're just like, yes, that was their vision. Like when you can see a team's vision for a player manifest itself on the field and especially that quickly. And I know he wasn't ready. He should have had a touchdown on that slant. Like it's not all perfect. But like when you can just see it come together that quickly, you're like, yes, this was the plan and I feel good that it can work out.
Let's get to the swing points for the 2025 Panthers. Dave, why don't you kick us off here? Where could this season pivot for Carolina?
Does any of the we just argued about matter if they don't improve their run defense? Like,
or just defense, period.
Defense, period. But specifically, wait, Robert, tell the good listeners the stat you gave us on the pre-pro call. Like, that's what I'm talking about right here.
This front for Carolina, we're talking about historic stuff here. They were the first defense in the next-gen era since 2016 to allow a 50% rushing success rate. They also had the second lowest pressure rate of the past 5 years per next-gen. I mean, this was historically bad stuff from Carolina up front last season.
Do you remember
That's
who
so
was the
gross.
worst pass rush over that unit? Do you have that pulled? Because that is like, how are you worse than that unit? That Panthers team was stinky.
I believe it was the 2022 Chicago Bears.
Oh, you know what? Okay, I can buy that. That's bad. That's real bad.
I believe it was the 2022 Chicago Bears.
When the run numbers are that dismal, like I said, I mean, nothing else really matters. You're not going to be competitive in enough games. Bryce Young is not going to be able to throw you into games where you just can't get off the field and you're just giving defenses whatever the hell they want. And so clearly they did a lot to fix that. Like a lot of their expenditures were on the front. You mentioned the 2 draft picks, Tershawn Wharton, Bobby Brown III, Patrick Jones, who I loved as a role player in Minnesota last year. So you can't do it all in one offseason, but I have.
They tried.
Yeah,
They're doing as much as you can.
And hey, thanks Patriots for Milton Williams not being part of this, I guess. But we'll see. It can't be worse, right? It definitely can't be worse, especially with this.
No, it truly can't be worse.
This is literally
Sometimes
a case
we
where
are
that's
misguided
fair.
there. It truly can't be worse.
Not only can it statistically not be worse, but like with this amount of expenditure, even if they're not all good, something's got to go right. Like 1 or 2 of these guys have to be useful players and make you viable, which it'll go a long way just because you won't be historically bad.
I just love the stylistic differences in some of the guys they added. Like Scorton and Umi are just so different. And I don't think that was intentional. Maybe a little bit, but I just don't think they thought Princely would be there in the third round.
Mhm.
And so their ability to kind of maneuver around and make that happen. I think Scorton is just one of those guys who, I mean, he just that guy just eats rocks. Like, I just absolutely love him. Like, that's just the way that he plays, and you combine that with when teams are in this position, and I actually really appreciate a lot of the ways that Carolina has built this offseason. They spent a lot of money in free agency, but this is a team that, even in a down year for free agents, they're spending on second contract players. These are young players that hopefully are gonna be able to be a part of your foundation on defense over the next 2 or 3 years as you mold yourself into a contender. Bobby Brown is like 24 years old. Deshaun Wharton's a second contract player. Trevin Merrick is a second contract player. So sometimes when teams are a little bit aggressive, it doesn't mesh well with the timeline. This reminds me a little bit of what the Broncos did a couple years ago, where we didn't really know what they were. They spent a lot of money, but they spent a lot of money on second contract guys that can become a part of the foundation. So we'll see how much it actually works and how much of a difference it makes. They weren't playing with NFL players last year. Even if these guys aren't stars, they are NFL players, and I'm at least excited to see what sort of step that can mean for this unit overall. My swing point for Carolina, talking about young players, is just the second year pass catchers. Like, what is Xavier Legette in this offense? What is Jalen Coker? What is Jatavian Sanders? I think that Legette specifically benefits the most from McMillan being involved here, because now you can use him as a move piece. He can just be a vertical presence within the offense. You don't have to worry about him on the line of scrimmage on releases against number one corners like you did last year. It allows him to come along at the right pace. And Derrik, I know you like Jatavian Sanders, and I think that they're excited about what he can be as like a pass catching tight end that kind of complements what Tommy Tremble, who I believe just came off the PUP list today, can be for them as more of that traditional second tight end that they have.
Yeah, like, I'm as excited as anyone about Teterow McMillan in a vacuum, but again, moving Xavier Legette, I know he's big and looks like an X receiver. That's never what he was supposed to be coming out of college. Like, he is more like the Debo-ish type of receiver at times. You can just run him straight down the field if you want to. Like, he's a very unique, you kind of just want him running in a straight line one way or the other type of player, and I think him being on the line as much as he was didn't really help him unlock that. And then, yeah, the tight end room, like, I feel like I have a better grasp of how the receiver room is going to shake out in terms of the roles and in terms of who's going to get that many snaps. The tight end room is fascinating to me because you have Tremble, who has been their leading tight end for a couple of years now, but he's coming off of some injuries. Jatavian Sanders, like, I did not like him coming out of college. I just didn't know if he had enough juice, but he looked like he was a little bit more athletic than I gave him credit for as a rookie. And then his ball skills are really, really nice. Like, he caught some of those, like, Bryce Young's just going to throw it up near the sideline type of balls. I think that could be really value for them. And then they drafted Mitchell Evans, who is another, like, he's not a good athlete, but he can run to his spot 7 yards down the field, turn around and catch anything around him. And I think that, again, for a guy like Bryce Young, that could be super valuable. So I'm just interested to see how that tight end room shakes out, because I think they have like 3 actually playable guys.
Dave, what is keeping you up at night about the 2025 Panthers?
This is twofold, which we'll get into because they just can't afford the losses in the secondary, I don't think. But I just I just really want JC Horn to be healthy enough to have the career that I want him to have. I felt like when he signed his deal in March, it raised a lot of eyebrows, and understandably so. The guy's only played in 54% of his games. He's missed 10 plus games in half of his NFL season. So to sign him to a $100 million contract, kudos to Dan Morgan for having the guts to do that, the trust that he's going to be healthier, because it's a huge risk when that type of investment is not on the field. But he's such a fun player. And I went back and I was just watching Panthers defense cut-ups last night, which God help me for doing that. But he's a really fun player. He's long as hell. He's physical. That was, coming out of college, it was like, is this guy going to grab too much and get flagged too much to play in the NFL? But he straddles that line really well. Like, he's able to be physical and just bully guys without getting flagged. He got run past a couple of times last year. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that he's not working with a loaded supporting cast, but I think he really is that caliber of cornerback if he can stay healthy. And the only reason people don't view him that way is we just don't have that many games of him being healthy. And obviously the Panthers just aren't playing on big stages very often. So I think he's capable of being an all-pro corner. There's no reason we can't talk about him the way we talk about the Stingleys and the Sauces of the world, other than he's just got to be on the field more often. Last year was a great step, and I'm just very I'm anxious that he can maintain that.
What becomes really important is that the secondary beyond him, that's the area where you can only do so much in one offseason. Like, this is a group that still has some holes. Mike Jackson, you hopefully can get by with, but they're going to need an upgrade at that other outside corner spot somewhere. They like Corey Thornton, who's an undrafted free agent for them, but I think that's more of a long-term play than him going to be an impact player this year. And we'll see how the other secondary spots shake out, because with Merrick specifically, I think they want him to play a role that's similar to some of these really flexible big nickel players, where he's going to be in the slot playing close to the line of scrimmage in some of the looks that they have, where they can really weaponize him as the second best player in the secondary. They paid him to do that. Well, if that happens, then you need two guys to play safety that are not Trevon Merrick. I think the hope is that Lathan Ransom eventually gets to that place early in the season, and then you can use him and Damani Richardson and Nick Scott. If you have to get by with Nick Scott, he knows the system. But even that, it's like, all right, we're really piecing this thing together. So the secondary to me is still, Derrik, probably the area of this roster that has the furthest to go before this team is really actually going to make any sort of noise.
I don't know. I think there's a set of players that play directly in front of them that give me just as much of an ick.
I knew you were going to mention this.
Those linebackers,
this is the other
man.
spot. Corner and off-ball linebacker are the two spots that need addressing on this team.
I think if I had to rank the 32 like starting linebacker duos in the NFL, they would be hard pressed to find themselves above like 30. Like, this is just a unit that I think is really tough. Like Christian Roseboom, I know that he's like had played in a similar system in LA, and so that's why they brought him in, but that does not inspire me. And then Trevin Wallace, they drafted last year in the 3rd round, but he was very much a coming into the league like straight line runaround guy. And we're going to hope that by year 3 or year 4, he's a guy worth paying. I think he has a lot more to prove after his rookie year. And so this is just a unit that I do think that the players in front of them being better and actually giving them a chance is certainly going to help in a way that they, maybe they were just left out to dry last year. But I'm pretty scared of what the middle of this defense looks like.
Dave, what are you watching in the first month of the season with the Carolina Panthers?
I am really intrigued by how the Panthers manage their running back room. And my eyebrow raised a little bit in the spring when obviously Chuba Hubbard had a really nice season for them. They signed him to a nice deal. And then they go out and get Rico Dowdle, who is a good player. It felt kind of redundant to me, to be honest. And then if that wasn't weird enough, they drafted Trevor Etienne in the 4th round. And if you're a 4th round pick, I expect something of you right away. I mean, Jalen Wright, Bucky Irving, Ray Davis were 4th round picks last year. Rashawn Johnson was a 4th round pick. Chuba Hubbard himself was a 4th round pick, by the way. Like, you draft a running back that early, I don't expect him to just play special teams and sit on the bench. So they got 3 guys who I view as pretty equal, and I'm curious to see how it shakes out. I think Chuba, I would guess, is the lead guy, and Rico Dowdle.
That's undeniable.
Do you you think so?
Yeah, that's undeniable. I think they'll ride with Chuba. I think that Rico Dowdle will kind of be the secondary guy, and I think they'll slow play the Trevor Etienne thing. They're excited about Rico Dowdle. I think they like a lot of the things that he can do, but I think Chuba is the dude there.
Why, other than the money, why do you think that?
Well, they love Chuba Hubbard. Like, he's just one of those guys that they ran to pay Chuba Hubbard based on not only what he produced last year, but I think the phrasing was he's everything we want to be as an organization. Like, they want Chuba Hubbard to be their guy.
Look at the guards they paid, and then look at the way that Chuba Hubbard runs. He fits exactly what they want to be stylistically.
He is.
I think that Rico Dowdle could be more a part of this offense than it might seem, considering how productive Chuba Hubbard was last year.
Okay, and I don't mean to diminish Chuba Hubbard. I just think Rico Dowdle had a really nice season himself. You realize, and I think
in a bad situation,
Chuba was a 100-meter sprinter, I believe, like in college or before college. Like, I think people think of him as this explosive guy, and maybe people think of Rico as more of a physical plotter. Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard had the exact same number of explosive runs last year, which I thought was really interesting when I saw it. And also, Rico Dowdle, I think, has the better skill set on third down. Here's a weird stat. Chuba Hubbard was 9th in the league in receptions among running backs with 43. Somehow he didn't crack 200 receiving yards, which sounds really hard to do. How do you catch 43 passes and finish with like 170 receiving yards? That seems impossible to me, especially because Chuba's got some juice. So I love Chuba Hubbard. That's not the point. The point is really that I think Rico Dowdle's a really good player too. And then when you spend a 4th round pick on a running back, I'm just curious to see how it all shakes out. Even if Chuba's the lead guy, I think the way that they deploy all these guys could be interesting.
When I'm watching the first month of the season, just what sort of wrinkles do we see in year 2 of this offense? Because I think last year was really the bare bones of what they wanted to be. And you think about even the diversity of the run game. This was mostly mid-zone sort of team, the same way it was with Dave Canales when he was with Tampa in 2023. They have an offensive line to be better than that. This group was like middle of the pack last year in rushing success rate, despite having a pretty simple approach on the ground. And if they can start diversifying that a little bit, I think they have the talent up front, especially as a run blocking unit, to take a step there. Where if we can have a couple more explosives because we have some more complementary runs, I think they have the pieces to make that happen. Damian Lewis can be a puller in some gap schemes. Robert Hunt is really good on the move. So how they weaponize that group as a run blocking unit this year, I want to see what that next step looks like. And then what's the evolution with the passing game? You know, when you look at the structure of this offense, it really started to change in the back half of the season when Bryce Young became established and they really understood what he liked. In the back half of last year, they were in spread looks 30% of the time, which was a top 5 rate compared to about 24% of the time in the first half of the season, because they think he does a lot of good work when you spread things out for him and he can see things before the snap and gain information that way. They were 7th in the NFL out of empty in the back half of the season in EPA per play, and they were 4th in the amount of empty snaps that they used. So how they married that spread out world with some of the condensed run world that they want to use, it's not easy to do. But I think some of the ways that you can do it is like with quick motions and changing the picture. That's not something you can necessarily tap into with a lot of young guys in year 1 of a system. But as these guys get into year 2 of this system, Coker, Leggett, Jatavian Sanders, can you add some of those layers where you're marrying that condensed run world with the spread passing world that you want to be in? So I just think there are a lot of different layers to consider with this offense that I do think can come together as guys get a little bit more acclimated to what the system is. We just didn't really see that version of it last year.
And I think to that end, they should watch as much Buffalo as they can. Because if I think about what the run game can be, especially from maybe if they want to get a little bit more condensed, a little bit more under center, bring in some heavier bodies. Again, I think Mitchell Evans can be a good blocker. Sanders can be a good blocker on the move, while also somehow marrying that with like we want to be an empty a lot, which is something the Bills still can go to a lot because Josh Allen is incredibly comfortable at that. And so obviously some of the talent differences are wide between these two teams, but like not every offense has to be like a series offense where we do this to set up this to set up this. It can be like we are making you defend 2 very different styles of offense kind of operation. And that probably is like the best marriage for the Panthers.
The last thing here, they've given Bryce Young a lot of autonomy at the line of scrimmage. Like he's going to have a toolbox to change things, to, change certain routes based on certain looks. And so that going from year 1 to year 2 of an offense, you can see a jump there. And so him just having a little bit more flexibility in getting those guys into the right plays and trying to account for the way defenses are playing against them with that group in year 2, with better receiving talent. I don't know, man. I'm curious to see how it looks. I have some faith about how exciting and how fun this group could be. Dave, what in your mind does success look like for the 2025 Panthers?
It starts and ends with Bryce Young being cemented as your guy. He doesn't have to climb into some upper echelon of NFL quarterbacks. Maybe he's like at the Dalton line, which is fitting because Andy Dalton is his backup quarterback still. If he, just be there, be a guy that the organization can be confident that they're going to build around and they don't have to start over. That is A-okay. And if he does that, I would love to see the Panthers pick outside the top 10 in the draft for the first time since 2019. They have been.
That's crazy. That's a crazy stat.
It's disgusting.
Just crazy.
The world was different the last time the Panthers picked outside the top 10.
Be good enough to pick outside the top 10. And if you are, then it probably means Bryce Young was pretty good.
Be a team that I have fun watching every single week offensively. Don't be embarrassing defensively. And by the end of the season, are you in the hunt graphic in week 17? That to me is success for this team. That is real progress from where they've been. And again, I believe in some of the things they've done in the way that they're trying to build the roster. I think that Dan Morgan and that group, since he took over, there are some teams where, like, I'm not trying to pick on anybody. Like last year's Titans come to mind, where I look at the offseason last year's Titans had. I'm like, explain to me how this makes sense. Like, explain to me how this is in pursuit of you eventually winning a championship as an NFL franchise. I can't say that about the Panthers. I can get on board with most of the process, and we'll see how much of that stuff actually falls into place. Thanks for watching the Athletic Football Show. Subscribe to the channel to keep up with us. Like and comment on this video, and we'll see you next time.